All right, so the topic of my refutation is on gun control. In summary, the topics of my opponent are: major claim was limiting possession of guns fails to decrease crime. Secondary supporting claims were countries with gun restrictions continue to have high crime rates, and access to weapons is also necessary for self-defense. For the first secondary claim, that countries with gun restrictions continue to have high crime rates, is problematic for two reasons. First, crime could be counted or reported differently in other countries, especially in countries that rely on tourism. A separate example is that the U.S. FBI divides crime into two categories. There's violent crime, which is described as murder, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, and there's property crime, which is burglary, theft, and arson. But they specifically state that property crime, there is no force or threat of force against the victims, which means that it's questionable if firearms are necessary for protection in this category. So when the advocate cites the crime rates of other countries, what crime rates are we getting? Are we getting violent crime rates that need firearms for protection? Is it a combination of violent crimes and property crimes? What are we getting? We don't know. Second, the advocate's position can only be strengthened if deregulation of gun possession, which would result in greater access to firearms, causes a decrease in crime rate. This is difficult to prove because crimes are reported by victims. If you defend yourself with a firearm, you are less likely to report the crime, which artificially deflates the crime rate. For example, if I said that crime rates in Compton have decreased after deregulation of firearms, but I have to pull out my firearm twice a night walking home to avoid being mugged, I can't really say that crime's decreased, I'm just not reporting it. Next, there's insufficient data for the statistics used to support the claim that access to weapons is necessary for self-defense. The advocate's claim is based on a nationwide survey conducted in 1993 in which a little under 5,000 households participated. The problem with that is that there's over 105 million households in the U.S., according to the U.S. Census Bureau. That means that this survey only covered 0.005% of the population. That's 5 out of every 100,000 households participated. And to give you even further reference, in the city of Pomona, there's about 40,000 households. So out of those 40,000 households, 2 of them were surveyed. In addition, the survey inflates percentages with its method of counting. The survey found, quoting, found that over the previous 5 years, at least 3.5% of households had members who had used a gun in self-defense. The use of 5 years is really what's the problem here. If I ask the class in the last year how many people have known someone who's lost a job, the response is going to be different if I say over the last 5 years how many people have known someone that's lost a job. The numbers get bigger, but that's not really a reflection on if unemployment is out of control or not. In addition to the advocate's first claim references crime rates, which is calculated by year, so why include a survey that uses a 5-year block of incidences? This, combined with the previous point, makes it highly probable that it was included because the high numbers would benefit the advocate's claim. Finally, the example that the advocate provided is problematic because its conclusion is based on luck rather than effective use of firearms for protection. In the example, 2 masked gunmen invade the home of Tiffany Bibbs and forcibly take all the money and jewelry in the house. One of the gunmen took Bibbs' baby as a hostage and exited the house. Gerald Beverly, who was a visitor in the house at the time of the invasion, arms himself and pursues the gunman. The gunman then put the baby on the porch and opened fire on Beverly, who returned fire and killed one of the 2 men. The key to this happy ending is that the gunman put the hostage down, which is counter to the purpose of taking a hostage in the first place. Had the gunman kept the baby, as is usually the case in hostage situations, Beverly's actions could have resulted in severe injury to the baby. If he had opened fire, the baby easily could have been used as a shield. If Beverly did not open fire, but threatened to use lethal force, the gunman would instinctively have threatened injury to the child, which is just a lose-lose situation. In conclusion, after a problematic reference to crime rates, insufficient data collected for the statistics, and the use of an example that's dominated by luck, the claim limiting possession of guns fails to decrease crime must be rejected.
All right, well, the secondary points are all labeled. On the first point, there's a lot of challenge to the data, and I think that some of the presses are okay, this notion about whether we're dealing with violent crime or nonviolent crime and whether or not the comparisons are legitimate. That's an okay question to ask. I don't think it's a particularly strong challenge, but it's certainly something that is worth asking about. What would be useful at this point would be some follow-up argument with some data of your own to suggest that the analysis of the advocate was unreasonable, or in fact that there is a reason to believe the opposite of what the advocate presented. But we don't get any of that. We get another press then on the analysis of the evidence that the advocate presented. I thought you asked some more good questions and made some very reasonable challenges on the statistic based on the survey, although the main challenge seems to be to the size of the survey. Why a 5,000 household survey is inappropriate for making a generalization is not explained, except that it's a very small percentage of the population. But of course, political polls use extremely small percentage of the population. They get fairly accurate results. So you need to have some explanation about why this sized survey is problematic. I like the analysis on the 5-year argument. I thought that was pretty effective, and you explained well why it's maybe biasing the results in some way. Again, I think the press is reasonable, but without any counterclaim or evidence to go along with it, I think that you don't have quite the strong argument that you might have. You've got a good general response. Probably 90% of the argument that you just made, you could have made immediately after the speech. In other words, this would be the kind of thing, if you were in a debate and you had done no research on the subject whatsoever, say, okay, what kinds of questions can I ask? What kinds of challenges can I make? I think you came up with some pretty good challenges and reasonable questions to make. But you had a little bit more time than, having to speak right afterwards, and so I think we expect a little bit more substance to the argument. All right, thank you.